The black SUV slammed to a stop. Daniel Mensa's hand shot out, gripping the driver's headrest so hard his knuckles turned white. "Sir?" the driver asked. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the woman ahead, bent under a bundle of firewood dust coating her skin, two little girls trailing behind her like shadows. His ex-wife. The woman he'd abandoned 10 years ago. And those children? Those twin girls with faces that looked exactly like his own. His fiancée Cynthia leaned forward. "Daniel, why did we stop?" But Daniel was already opening the door. What he didn't know yet, the lie that destroyed his marriage was about to destroy everything he'd built since. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Daniel Mensa hadn't set foot in this village in 10 years. 10 years of building. 10 years of climbing. 10 years of becoming the kind of man who made other men stand when he entered a room. Now, he sat in the back of a luxury SUV watching the city of Accra fade behind him through tinted windows. Glass towers gave way to red soil. Billboards disappeared into scattered trees. The air changed thicker, heavier, carrying the smell of earth and smoke and memory. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Sir, should I take the main road or go through the village center?" "The center," Daniel said. Cynthia shifted beside him. She crossed her legs, adjusted her designer sunglasses, and looked up from her phone for the first time in an hour. "You want to drive through the middle of it?" "Yes." "Why?" Daniel didn't answer. He wasn't sure himself. Maybe he wanted to see the faces. Maybe he wanted them to see his. Maybe some part of him needed to look his past in the eye and confirm once and for all that he had risen above it. The SUV rolled slowly down the narrow road. Heads turned. Women stopped mid-conversation. Children froze in their play, staring at the vehicle like it had fallen from the sky. Whispers spread like fire. "That car. Who is that? Could it be?" Nana Mensa's son. Daniel felt it. The recognition. The awe. The quiet respect that came with success. It fed something inside him, something hungry, something he'd carried since the days when he stood in this same village with nothing but shame in his pockets. Cynthia leaned toward the window, suddenly interested. "They know you. They remember." She smiled. "Must feel good, coming back like this." Daniel said nothing. The SUV passed the old market square. He recognized the spot where he used to stand for hours trying to sell goods no one wanted to buy. He looked away quickly. That man was dead. Or so he believed. "You never told me much about your ex-wife," Cynthia said casually. Daniel's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to tell. It's in the past." Still, she continued scrolling through her phone again. "You don't go from nothing to this without scars." She made her choices. I made mine. Cynthia nodded, satisfied. She slipped her hand into his. "Well, I'm glad you moved on. You deserve better now." Daniel squeezed her hand, but his gaze drifted back to the road. And then he saw her. A woman. Bent forward under the weight of a heavy bundle of firewood strapped across her back. Her clothes were faded, patched in places. Her steps were slow but steady. And behind her, two little girls. They walked close together, mirroring each other's movements. Their arms swung in rhythm. Their heads were slightly bowed. Their faces were serious in a way that made Daniel's chest tighten without warning. Something about them hit him like a fist. "Stop the car," he said. The driver tapped the brakes. "Daniel," Cynthia asked, "why are we stopping?" But Daniel was already reaching for the door handle. His hand trembled. His heart pounded against his ribs. The woman ahead lifted her head, sensing the presence of the car, and Daniel's world tilted. Grace. Her face was thinner than he remembered. Lines framed her eyes, not from age, but from years of squinting against the sun and holding back tears. Her dress hung loose on her frame. The scarf around her head was worn thin. But it was her. Unmistakably her. The woman he had loved. The woman he had accused of betrayal. The woman he had left behind without looking back. Daniel stepped out of the car. His legs felt unsteady. Grace stared at him. Her expression didn't change. Not surprise, not anger. Just a careful blankness, like she was bracing herself for whatever blow might come next. Behind her, the two girls watched with wide eyes. They had never seen a man dressed like this so close before. His watch glinted in the sunlight. His shoes were spotless. Everything about him seemed unreal. The taller girl tugged at Grace's dress. "Mama?" she whispered. "Who is he?" Grace flinched. Daniel heard the question, and it struck him like a knife to the chest. His eyes dropped to the girls. Really looked at them this time. They were identical. Not just in the way twins often were, but in a way that made his pulse race. The shape of their eyes, the slight tilt of their noses, the serious, observant way they studied him. He had seen that look before. In the mirror. His knees went weak. Cynthia stepped out of the car, her heels clicking sharply against the dirt road. She folded her arms and looked at Grace from head to toe, the firewood, the dust, the children clinging to her sides. "So," Cynthia said loudly, her voice cutting through the silence. "This is the woman." Grace's gaze flicked toward her but said nothing. "You never told me she'd still be here." Cynthia continued looking at Daniel. Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't take his eyes off the girls. Cynthia stepped closer to Grace, examining her like she was inspecting something distasteful. "You could have at least cleaned up," she said. "Don't you have any pride?" The words landed like stones. Grace's grip tightened on the rope across her shoulders. She straightened her back, lifting her chin slightly. Pride was sometimes the only shield left to the poor. "I'm sorry," Grace said quietly, not looking at Cynthia, but at Daniel. "If we're blocking the road, we'll move." She shifted her weight, preparing to step aside. "No," Daniel said quickly. The word came out louder than he intended. "Wait." Grace froze. He took a step closer, then another. He stopped at a careful distance, as if afraid she might vanish if he came too near. "Grace," he said. Her name felt heavy on his tongue. Foreign, familiar, painful. She met his eyes. Her expression remained guarded. "Daniel." Hearing his name in her voice stirred something deep inside him. Memories flooded back. Late nights, shared dreams, whispered promises under a leaking roof. Cynthia let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is unbelievable," she muttered. "We drive all this way and suddenly we're in the middle of some village drama." She looked directly at Grace. "You could show some respect, you know, standing there like that." The smaller girl suddenly spoke. "Why are you shouting at my mama?" Everyone froze. Cynthia turned slowly, clearly unaccustomed to being addressed by a child. "Excuse me. I'm Akua," the girl said, her small voice trembling but brave. "And this is my sister, Adwoa. Why are you being mean?" Adwoa squeezed her sister's hand and stared straight at Daniel. "And you?" Adwoa said quietly. "Why are you staring at us like that?" Daniel's breath left him in a rush. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to their level. His legs trembled. I'm sorry," he said. The words sounded strange even to himself. Grace watched him carefully. Her heart pounded. She had spent years preparing herself for rejection, for humiliation. But not for this confusion, this look on Daniel's face, as if the ground beneath him had given way. A voice called from the side of the road. "Grace!" Everyone turned. An old woman approached her walking stick, tapping against the dirt. Nana Ya, the village elder. Her eyes widened when she noticed Daniel. She stopped short. "So," Nana Ya said slowly, "you finally came back." Daniel straightened. The weight of the past pressed down on him harder than ever before. "Nanaya," he said. The old woman did not greet him. She did not smile. She simply looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring the years that had passed and the damage they had left behind. "You've come back," she said, "with all your cars and fine clothes." Daniel nodded, unable to find words that didn't sound hollow. Nanaya turned her gaze to Grace. "My child." Grace inclined her head respectfully. "Nana," Cynthia let out a sharp breath. "Is everyone here planning to stare all day? Some of us have places to be." The old woman's eyes snapped to her. They were calm, but piercing. "And who are you?" Cynthia lifted her chin. "I'm Daniel's fiancée." A murmur rippled through the villagers who had gathered at a cautious distance. Nanaya studied Cynthia slowly from her polished shoes to her manicured nails. "I see," she said. "Then you should know better than to speak without respect on another person's land." Cynthia scoffed. "Respect for what? Carrying firewood? Living like this?" Grace felt the words cut deep. She had endured whispers before. Mockery. Pity. But hearing it spoken so openly made her chest ache. Still, she remained silent. Adwoa did not. "Stop," the little girl said. Everyone turned. Adwoa stepped forward, placing herself fully in front of her mother. Her small shoulders were squared. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "Stop talking like that," Adwoa repeated. "My mama works hard." Akua joined her voice softer but firm. "She's not doing anything wrong." Cynthia stared at them in disbelief. "Children," she said coldly, "this conversation doesn't concern you." "It concerns us," Adwoa shot back. "You're shouting at our mama." A sharp intake of breath passed through the crowd. Daniel felt something twist violently inside him. He had spent years in rooms filled with powerful men negotiating deals, facing threats, handling manipulation without flinching. But this small girl defending her mother with nothing but courage, unraveled him completely. "Adwoa," Grace said gently, reaching for her daughter's shoulder. "It's okay." But Adwoa didn't move. She didn't look back. Daniel stepped forward. "Cynthia," he said, his voice tight. "That's enough." Cynthia turned to him sharply. "Are you serious right now? You're letting children talk to me like this? They're protecting their mother, and you're disrespecting her." Cynthia laughed a short, incredulous sound. "So now you're taking their side. I'm asking you to stop." For the first time since they'd met, Cynthia saw something in Daniel's eyes that unsettled her. Not anger. Something deeper. Something dangerous. She folded her arms. "Fine," she said stiffly. "If this woman means so much to you, maybe you should explain why she's still living like this." Grace flinched despite herself. Daniel's gaze shifted to her, the firewood on her back, the thinness of her frame, the exhaustion she tried so hard to hide. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Because he had no answer that wouldn't condemn him. Nanaya clicked her tongue softly. "Some lives are not shaped by laziness," she said. "They are shaped by abandonment." The word landed heavily. Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "Is that supposed to be an accusation?" "It is a fact," Nanaya replied. "This woman did not choose this life." Grace felt her throat tighten. "Nana, please," she said quietly. "It's all right." "No," the old woman said firmly. "It is not." She turned back to Daniel. "You left her," Nanaya said. "You left her when she needed you most." Cynthia stiffened. "Daniel told me everything. She betrayed him." A collective gasp spread through the villagers. Grace closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come someday. The lie spoken aloud sharpened, thrown at her like a blade. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at Daniel, not with anger, but with a quiet, weary sadness. "Is that what you still believe?" she asked. Daniel's mouth went dry. He hesitated. That's what I was told. Told by whom? Nanaya demanded. The people who wanted you gone, the ones who benefited from tearing you apart. Cynthia raised her voice. This is ridiculous. We're not standing in the middle of a village road to listen to fairy tales. Then you should get back in your car, Nanaya replied calmly. Cynthia turned to Daniel. Are you really going to let this go on? Daniel looked at Grace again. For years, he had held on to his version of the past because it justified his success, because it made him the victim who rose above betrayal rather than the man who walked away from responsibility. But standing here seeing Grace like this, seeing the children, something inside him cracked. I don't know the full truth, he said quietly, but I know this. He gestured toward Grace and the girls. This doesn't look like betrayal. Cynthia's face flushed. So what? You feel guilty now, is that it? Daniel did not respond immediately. Instead, he crouched again this time, deliberately bringing himself eye level with Adwoa and Akua. What are your names? He asked gently. Adwoa hesitated, then answered. Adwoa. And you? Akua, the smaller one said softly. Daniel swallowed hard. Do you go to school? Adwoa shook her head. Mama says we will soon. Soon? Daniel echoed, his voice thick. Cynthia threw her hands up. I cannot believe this, she said. Daniel, you're embarrassing me. Daniel stood slowly. No, he said. I'm embarrassing myself. He turned to Grace. I didn't know, he said. I swear I didn't know. Grace's hands trembled slightly under the weight of the firewood. Not knowing doesn't change what happened, she replied calmly. I learned how to survive without you. I can see that. And I don't need saving. Grace added, her voice firm. All I ask is that you don't make my life harder than it already is. Her words cut deeper than any accusation. Cynthia stepped back toward the car. I'm done, she said sharply. If you're choosing this chaos, don't expect me to stand here and applaud. She opened the car door. Daniel did not stop her. Instead, he turned to Grace once more. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. I don't even know what I'm here to do yet, but I won't walk away again. Grace studied him for a long moment, searching his face for truth. We'll see, she said simply. She adjusted the strap across her shoulders and began to walk. Adwoa and Akua followed close behind, their small hands gripping the edges of their mother's dress. Daniel watched them go, his heart pounding, the weight of years pressing down on him like never before. Behind him, the car door slammed shut. Ahead, the past walked away slowly, steadily, carrying firewood and two fragile lives he could no longer ignore. That night, Daniel did not sleep. The guest room prepared for him at the family house was large, well-lit, carefully cleaned. Yet it felt unbearably small. He lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the scene on the village road again and again. The look in Grace's eyes, the weight on her back, the way Adwoa and Akua stood like shields in front of her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girls. They were too thin, too serious, too familiar. Daniel rose from the bed and walked to the window. Outside, the village was quiet. Lantern lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere a child laughed softly before being hushed by an adult. Life continued indifferent to the storm raging inside him. He had returned home believing he had already won. Now he wasn't so sure. For years, Daniel had told himself the same story whenever the past tried to surface. Grace had betrayed him. She had embarrassed him. She had broken his trust when he was most vulnerable. That story had been his armor. It allowed him to leave without guilt. It allowed him to build an empire without looking back. But armor once cracked cuts the wearer. A knock came at the door. He turned sharply. "Come in." Mr. Kofi stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. The older man had served Daniel's family for decades. He moved with the calm assurance of someone who had seen many cycles of joy and regret. "I thought you might still be awake," Mr. Kofi said gently. Daniel nodded. "I can't sleep." The older man studied him for a moment. "I saw you today." Daniel sighed. "Then you saw everything." "Yes, I did." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he asked, his voice low. "Why didn't anyone say she was suffering like this?" Mr. Kofi's eyes softened. "You left very angry, Daniel. You didn't want to hear anything that didn't match what you already believed." The words stung because they were true. Daniel clenched his jaw. "Those children," he said quietly. "How old are they?" "6, Mr. Kofi answered. "Almost 7. The room felt suddenly colder. Daniel closed his eyes. The numbers lined up too perfectly to ignore. He had known it the moment he saw them. Denial had only delayed the pain. "I destroyed her life," Daniel whispered. "No," Mr. Kofi said gently. "You abandoned it. There is a difference, but both carry consequences." Daniel turned toward him, desperation creeping into his voice. "Was she unfaithful?" Mr. Kofi did not hesitate. "No." The certainty in his tone hit Daniel harder than any shout. "Then why—" Daniel stopped himself, swallowing. "Why was I told otherwise?" "Because lies are convenient," Mr. Kofi replied. "And truth is often inconvenient to those who fear it." Daniel sank into the chair beside the bed. His strength was suddenly gone. His chest felt tight, his breathing shallow. "She was pregnant," he said hoarsely. "Wasn't she?" "Yes," Mr. Kofi confirmed. "She tried to tell you." Daniel covered his face with his hands. The weight of it crushed him. Not just the realization that the girls were his, but that Grace had carried that burden alone. That she had faced hunger, labor, childbirth, and years of hardship without the man who should have stood beside her. "What kind of man does that?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. Mr. Kofi placed a hand on his shoulder. "The kind who still has time to choose who he will become next." The words lingered in the air long after the older man left the room. When Daniel was alone again, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood. Before dawn, Daniel left the house quietly. He told no one where he was going. He drove himself this time, refusing the driver, needing to be alone with his thoughts. The road back to Grace's side of the village felt longer than before. When he arrived, the sun was just beginning to rise. He parked the car at a distance and stepped out, watching from afar. Grace was already awake. He saw her emerge from the small house, her movements careful, practiced. Adwoa and Akua followed soon after, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Daniel watched as Grace spoke softly to them, handing them food, adjusting Akua's dress, brushing dust from Adwoa's cheek. It was the kind of scene Daniel had imagined in another life, the life he should have had. His throat tightened. As Grace prepared to leave with the girls, Daniel stepped forward. She froze when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," Grace said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but I needed to see you." She studied him warily. "Why?" "Because I couldn't sleep knowing I might walk away again," he said honestly. "And I won't." Grace's expression did not soften. "Promises are easy in the morning." "I'm not making promises," Daniel said. "I'm asking for time, to understand, to do what I should have done years ago." She looked at him for a long moment, then down at her daughters. "Whatever this is," Grace said, "it must not hurt them." Daniel nodded immediately. "Never." It was the smallest agreement, fragile, uncertain, but it was the first step Daniel Mensah had taken in years toward facing the truth. Grace did not trust mornings anymore. For years, mornings had meant waking before the sun, ignoring the ache in her back, and finding ways to feed 2 children with almost nothing. Mornings meant survival. They did not mean hope. So when Daniel appeared at her door again the next day, she did not smile. She did not invite him inside. She simply stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance with her body. "You came back," she said flatly. "I told you I would." "Men say many things." Daniel absorbed the words without flinching. He deserved them. "I know," he said. "But I meant it." Grace studied his face, searching for the lie, the angle, the hidden agenda. She had learned to read people the hard way. Desperation had sharpened her instincts. "What do you want, Daniel?" "To help." "Help?" She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "You want to help now, after 10 years?" "Yes." "Why?" Daniel hesitated. He could have given her a dozen reasons. Guilt, responsibility, shame. But standing in front of her, he realized none of them captured what he actually felt. "Because I saw them," he said quietly. "I saw our daughters, and I can't unsee them." Grace's jaw tightened. "They are not your daughters," she said. "Not yet. Being a father is not about blood. It's about presence." "Then let me be present." "You think it's that simple?" "No," Daniel admitted. "I think it's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do." Grace said nothing for a long moment. Behind her, inside the small house, Daniel could hear the girls talking softly. Adwoa's voice steady and serious. Akua's lighter, more playful. His chest ached. "They don't know who you are," Grace finally said. "Not really. They've never asked about their father. I made sure of that." "Why?" Grace's eyes hardened. "Because I refused to let them grow up waiting for a man who was never coming back." The words hit Daniel like a blow. He took a breath, steadying himself. "I understand," he said, "and I'm not asking you to explain me to them. I'm asking you to let me earn whatever place I might have in their lives." Grace folded her arms. "Earn it how?" "However you decide, on your terms, at your pace." She watched him carefully, this man who had once been everything to her, who had shattered her world without looking back. He looked different now, not just older or wealthier. Something in his eyes had shifted. The arrogance was still there, buried deep, but it was cracked now, fractured by something she couldn't quite name. "The girls need to go to the clinic tomorrow," Grace said slowly. "Akua has been coughing at night. Adwoa gets tired easily. I've been putting it off because—" She stopped herself. "Because it costs money," Daniel finished. Grace nodded stiffly. "I'll take you," Daniel said immediately. "All 3 of you, tomorrow morning." "I didn't ask for—" "I know," Daniel interrupted gently. "You didn't ask. I'm offering. There's a difference." Grace stared at him for a long moment. "Fine," she said at last. "Tomorrow. But you follow my lead. You don't make decisions over our heads. You don't play hero." "Agreed." "And Daniel, yes, if you hurt them," Grace said, her voice dropping low, "I will never forgive you. Not for my sake. For theirs." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Grace stepped back and closed the door without another word. Daniel stood there for a moment, staring at the worn wood, listening to the muffled sounds of his daughters inside. Then he turned and walked back to his car. That evening, Cynthia was waiting for him at the family house. She sat in the main room, her posture rigid, her face a mask of controlled fury. She had changed clothes since the Village Road designer dress, perfect makeup, but her eyes betrayed her. She had not slept either. "Where were you?" she demanded as Daniel entered. "I went to see Grace." Cynthia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Again." "Yes." She stood abruptly, her heels clicking against the floor. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" she said. "You disappear for hours. You ignore my calls. You stand in the middle of some village defending a woman who—" "Who what?" Daniel interrupted calmly. Cynthia hesitated. "Who trapped you?" she said finally. "That's what this is, isn't it? She waited until you were successful, until you had something worth taking." Daniel shook his head slowly. She didn't trap me, Cynthia. She survived. There's a difference. Oh, please. Cynthia laughed a sharp, bitter sound. You've known her for 2 days since you came back, and suddenly she's some kind of saint. I've known her for 15 years, Daniel said quietly. I married her when I had nothing. I left her when I believed a lie. Cynthia froze. What lie? Daniel sat down heavily in one of the chairs. I was told she was unfaithful, he said. When I was struggling, when everything was falling apart, someone whispered in my ear that she was seeing another man, that she was planning to leave me once I made something of myself. He paused, rubbing his face with his hands. I believed it, he continued, because it was easier than believing I was failing on my own. I accused her. I refused to listen when she denied it. And I walked away. Cynthia stared at him. And now, you think it wasn't true? I know it wasn't true, Daniel said. I've spoken to people who were there. People who watched everything fall apart. Grace never betrayed me. The only betrayal was mine. Silence stretched between them. Cynthia's expression shifted from anger to something closer to fear. What about us? She asked, her voice smaller now. What about our plans? Daniel met her eyes. I don't know, he admitted. I can't think about that right now. You can't think about it. Cynthia's voice rose. We're engaged, Daniel. We have announcements scheduled, events. People are expecting. People can wait, Daniel said. This cannot. Cynthia took a step back as if he had struck her. You're choosing her. I'm choosing my children, Daniel corrected. Children I didn't know existed until yesterday. Children who have been living in poverty while I built an empire. Cynthia's face flushed. And what am I supposed to do? Stand here and watch you dismantle everything we built together. Daniel stood slowly. You can do whatever you want, Cynthia, he said. But I won't abandon them again. Not for you. Not for anyone. Cynthia stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes glistened, whether from anger or hurt, Daniel couldn't tell. You'll regret this, she said finally. Maybe, Daniel replied. But I would regret walking away more. Cynthia grabbed her purse from the table and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. This isn't over, she said. Then she was gone. Daniel stood alone in the empty room, listening to the sound of her car pulling away. He felt no relief, only the weight of choices yet to come. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Grace's house before dawn. He had dressed simply plain trousers, a clean shirt, no watch. He wanted to feel normal. He wanted to feel like the man he might have been if he had never left. Grace was already outside preparing the girls for the trip. She looked up when she saw him approach, her expression guarded, but not hostile. You're early, she said. I couldn't sleep. Grace nodded slightly, as if she understood. Adwa emerged from the house first, her eyes widening when she saw Daniel. You came back, she said. I told you I would. Adwa studied him for a moment, her young face serious beyond her years. Mama said men who leave don't come back. Daniel crouched down to her level. Your mama is right, he said. Most men don't, but I'm trying to be different. Trying? Yes, trying. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I can promise I'll keep trying. Adwoa considered this. Okay, she said finally, but if you leave again, I won't forgive you. The words were delivered without anger, just simple, honest truth. Daniel felt them land deep in his chest. I understand, he said. Akua appeared behind her sister, clinging to Grace's hand. She was quieter than Adwoa, more cautious. Her eyes watched Daniel with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Are you taking us somewhere? Akua asked softly. To see a doctor, Daniel replied gently. To make sure you're both healthy. Akua looked up at her mother. "Mama." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. "It's okay," she said. "We're all going together." The drive to the clinic took nearly an hour. Daniel kept his speed slow, careful on the uneven roads. In the back seat, Adwoa and Akua sat close together, their eyes wide as they watched the landscape pass. They had never been in a car like this before. Grace sat in the front beside Daniel, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She said nothing for most of the drive, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Thank you for letting me come." Grace didn't look at him. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We'll see how today goes." "Fair enough." Another silence. Then Grace spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I used to dream about this, you know." Daniel glanced at her. "Dream about what?" "About you coming back," Grace said. "In the early days when the girls were babies, I used to imagine you showing up one day, full of regret, ready to fix everything." She paused. "I stopped dreaming about it years ago." Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Why?" "Because hope was dangerous," Grace said. "It kept me waiting for something that wasn't coming. So I learned to stop hoping. I learned to survive on my own." Daniel felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. "And now?" he asked carefully. Grace finally turned to look at him. "Now, I don't know what to feel," she admitted. "Part of me wants to believe you've changed. Part of me is waiting for you to disappear again." "I won't." "You say that now." "I mean it." Grace studied his face. "Meaning it and proving it are different things," she said. Daniel nodded. "Then let me prove it." The clinic was crowded when they arrived. Families waited on wooden benches, children played in the dust outside, and a single nurse moved between patients with quiet efficiency. Daniel felt the eyes on him the moment he stepped out of the car, curious, suspicious questioning. He ignored them. Grace led the way, carrying Akua on her hip, while Adwoa walked beside her. Daniel followed at a respectful distance, letting Grace take the lead as he had promised. The wait was long. Daniel resisted the urge to use his influence to skip the line to make things happen faster. This was not a place for power. It was a place for patience. When Dr. Samuel Owusu finally called them in, Daniel felt his heart pounding. The examination was thorough. Too thorough. Dr. Owusu frowned as he reviewed the results, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "These girls are undernourished," he said carefully. "There are signs of anemia as well. Akua has developed a weakness in her lungs, likely from repeated respiratory infections that weren't properly treated." Grace's face went pale. "I did what I could," she whispered. "I didn't have—" "I know," Dr. Owusu interrupted gently. "This is not an accusation, Mrs. Mensah. Many families face the same challenges. But the children need proper nutrition, regular checkups, and a stable environment. Without these things, their health will continue to decline." Daniel stepped forward. "What do they need specifically?" Dr. Owusu looked at him. "Vitamins, better food, regular medical attention, and rest. Real rest, not the kind that comes from exhaustion." Daniel nodded. "They'll have it, whatever it takes." The doctor studied him for a moment, then turned back to Grace. "Mrs. Mensah, I would also recommend a DNA test. Given the circumstances, it might be helpful to have official documentation." The room went silent. Grace stiffened. Daniel held his breath. "Do it," Daniel said quietly. Grace looked at him sharply. "You didn't ask me." "I'm asking now," Daniel replied. "If you agree." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, though Daniel couldn't tell what. Finally, she nodded. "All right." The tests were arranged. Blood was drawn. Forms were signed. And then they waited. The results came 3 days later. Daniel was at the family house when the call came. He answered on the first ring, his hand trembling slightly. "Mr. Mensah," Dr. Owusu said, "the results are conclusive." Daniel closed his eyes. "Tell me." "Adwoa and Akua are your biological daughters. There is no doubt." The words hit him like a wave, relief and devastation crashing together. "Thank you," Daniel managed. "Thank you for letting me know." He ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. His daughters, his children, his responsibility. For years he had told himself that leaving Grace was justified, that she had betrayed him, that he was the victim. Now the truth stared back at him, undeniable. He had abandoned a pregnant woman. He had left his children to grow up in poverty. He had built an empire while they struggled to survive. What kind of man did that Daniel drove to Grace's house that evening? She was sitting outside when he arrived, watching the girls play in the fading light. Adwoa was teaching Akua some kind of clapping game, their small hands moving in rhythm. Grace looked up as Daniel approached. "You got the results," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I always knew," she admitted. "From the moment I realized I was pregnant, I knew they were yours." "Why didn't you—" Daniel stopped himself. "Why didn't you try to find me?" Grace's expression hardened. "I did try," she said. "In the beginning, I sent letters. I asked people to pass messages. Nothing reached you, or if it did, you ignored it." Daniel felt sick. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I didn't." "It doesn't matter," Grace interrupted. "What's done is done. The question is, what happens now?" Daniel sat down on the ground beside her, ignoring the dirt on his clothes. "I want to be their father," he said. "Not just in name, in reality." Grace watched the girls for a moment before responding. "Being a father isn't about showing up when it's convenient," she said. "It's about being there when it's hard, when they're sick, when they're scared, when they need someone at 3 a.m. "I understand." "Do you—" Grace turned to face him. "Because you've spent 10 years building a life that doesn't include us. You have businesses, responsibilities, a fiancé." "Had a fiancé," Daniel corrected quietly. Grace raised an eyebrow. "Cynthia left," Daniel explained. "She gave me a choice. I made it." Grace studied him. "You gave up your engagement for children you just met." "No," Daniel said. "I gave up a lie for the truth." Silence stretched between them. In the distance, Adwoa laughed at something Akua said, a pure, joyful sound that made Daniel's chest ache. "They deserve better than I can give them alone," Grace said finally. "I've done my best, but my best has limitations." "Then let me help remove those limitations." "It's not that simple." "I know," Daniel said. "Nothing worth doing is simple." Grace looked at him for a long moment. "If you hurt them," she said slowly, "if you make promises you can't keep, if you disappear again, I will never let you near them again. Do you understand?" "Yes." "And this isn't about us," Grace added firmly. "Whatever we had is gone. This is about them. Only them." Daniel nodded. "Only them." Grace exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Then we try," she said. "One day at a time. No promises, no expectations. Just trying." Daniel looked at her, this woman who had endured so much, who had raised his children alone, who had every right to hate him, but was still willing to let him try. "Thank you," he said. Grace shook her head. "Don't thank me. Earn it." The words echoed in Daniel's mind as he drove back to the family house that night. Earn it. 2 simple words. But they carried the weight of everything he had failed to do for 10 years. He didn't know if he could make things right. He didn't know if Grace would ever forgive him, or if his daughters would ever truly accept him. But for the first time in his life, Daniel Mensah wasn't running from uncertainty. He was walking into it. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn. He dressed quietly and drove to Grace's house again, not to make grand gestures, but to ask a simple question. Grace answered the door with tired eyes. "You again," she said. "Me again," Daniel replied. "The girls, are they awake?" "Not yet. Why?" Daniel hesitated. "I want to make them breakfast," he said. "If that's okay." Grace stared at him. "You want to cook?" "Yes." "Can you even cook?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I used to, before I had people to do it for me." Grace studied him for a moment, this man in expensive clothes asking permission to make breakfast for children he barely knew. Something in her expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but something close to curiosity. "The kitchen is small," she said finally. "Don't make a mess." She stepped aside, letting him enter. An hour later, Daniel stood over a simple meal, eggs, bread, sliced fruit, watching Adwoa and Akua eat with an enthusiasm that made his heart break. They were hungry, truly hungry. The kind of hunger that came from years of not having enough. And he had let that happen. "This is good," Akua said softly, looking up at him with wide eyes. Daniel smiled, though his chest ached. "I'm glad you like it." Adwoa ate more carefully, watching him between bites. "Are you going to stay?" she asked suddenly. Daniel set down his fork. "Yes," he said. "I'm going to stay." "For how long?" "For as long as you'll let me." Adwoa considered this. "Mama said people who leave always have excuses," she said. "Do you have excuses?" Daniel felt the weight of the question. "Yes," he admitted honestly. "I have many excuses, but excuses don't fix anything. Only actions do." Adwoa nodded slowly as if filing the answer away. "Okay," she said. "We'll see." Grace watched from the doorway, her arms folded. Her expression remained guarded, but something in her eyes had changed. Not trust, not yet. But perhaps the beginning of willingness to see what might come next. The days that followed moved slowly, each one a small test of Daniel's commitment. He showed up every morning without fail. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he simply sat outside while the girls ate breakfast, waiting for permission to be useful. He never pushed. He never demanded. He asked. Grace watched him carefully, measuring his words against his actions. She had learned long ago that men could say anything. It was what they did when no one was watching that mattered. 1 week passed, then 2. Daniel adjusted his business schedule. Calls from his office went unanswered or were delegated to people he had never trusted before. His board members sent concerned messages. Investors asked questions. He ignored them all. For the first time in 10 years, Daniel Mensah was not the center of his own world. On the 15th day, Akua woke up coughing. Grace heard it first, a wet rattling sound that pulled her from sleep in the middle of the night. She rushed to her daughter's side and found Akua struggling to breathe, her small chest heaving with each labored intake of air. "Mama!" Akua wheezed. "It hurts." Grace felt ice spread through her veins. She had heard this sound before. 2 years ago, Akua had caught a fever that lasted for days. Grace had carried her to the clinic on foot, waited for hours, and watched helplessly as her daughter fought for each breath. The medicine had been expensive, more than Grace could afford, but she had found a way. She always found a way. But this was different. This was worse. "Adwoa!" Grace called sharply. "Wake up! Get your shoes!" Adwoa sat up immediately, her eyes wide with fear. "What's wrong with Akua?" "She's sick. We need to go now." Grace lifted Akua into her arms. The child felt frighteningly light, too light, as if she were already slipping away. Her skin burned with fever. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. Outside, the night was pitch black. Rain had begun to fall, heavy drops that hammered the earth and turned the paths to mud. Grace hesitated at the doorway, calculating the distance to the clinic, the time it would take, the chances of finding help at this hour. "Mama," Akua whispered. "I'm scared." Grace held her tighter. "I know, my love. I know." But we're going to get help. She stepped into the rain. The walk was brutal. Grace's feet sank into mud with each step. Her arms burned from carrying Akua's weight. Adwoa followed close behind her, small hand gripping the back of her mother's dress, refusing to let go. They had made it halfway to the main road when headlights cut through the darkness. A car slowed to a stop. Daniel stepped out before the engine died. "Grace," he shouted over the rain. "What happened?" "She can't breathe," Grace cried, her voice breaking. "I don't know what's wrong. She can't breathe." Daniel moved instantly. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around Akua, shielding her from the rain. Then he took the child from Grace's arms and carried her to the car. "Get in," he said. "Both of you, now." Grace didn't argue. She grabbed Adwoa's hand and climbed into the back seat. Daniel was already behind the wheel, the engine roaring to life. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. "I don't know. An hour. Maybe more. I woke up and she was—" Grace's voice broke. "She was barely breathing." Daniel pressed the accelerator harder. The hospital was 40 minutes away. Daniel made it in 25. He pulled up to the emergency entrance and was out of the car before it fully stopped. He carried Aqua through the doors, shouting for help, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. Nurses came running. "She can't breathe," Daniel said desperately. "Please, she's only 6 years old. Please help her." They took Aqua from his arms and rushed her away on a gurney. Grace tried to follow, but her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, her body shaking with sobs she had held back for hours. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor. "She'll be okay," he said, though he didn't know if it was true. "She has to be okay." Grace clung to him, the man she had every reason to hate, the man she had spent years learning to live without. In that moment, none of it mattered. Only Aqua mattered. Adwoa stood beside them, silent and trembling. Her eyes were fixed on the doors where her sister had disappeared. "Is Aqua going to die?" she asked quietly. The question shattered something inside Daniel. He knelt down in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "No," he said firmly. "She's not going to die. The doctors are going to help her." Adwoa's lip trembled. "Promise." Daniel hesitated. He wanted to promise. He wanted to say the words that would take away her fear. But he had made too many empty promises in his life. "I promise I will do everything I can," he said carefully. "I promise I won't leave. I promise I'll be here." Adwoa searched his face. "Okay," she whispered. She didn't pull away from him. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her head against his shoulder. Daniel wrapped his arms around her and held on. The hours that followed were the longest of Daniel's life. He sat in the waiting room with Grace and Adwoa, watching the clock, counting the minutes, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Grace sat rigid beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the double doors. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. She hadn't moved. She had simply waited, the way she had waited for so many things in her life. Daniel wanted to say something, anything, to ease her fear. But he knew there were no words for this. No comfort that could bridge the gap between hope and despair. So he sat beside her in silence. At 3 a.m, Dr. Owusu emerged through the doors. Grace stood immediately, her body swaying with exhaustion. "Doctor," she breathed. "Please, is she—" "She's stable," Dr. Owusu said quickly. "The fever has broken. Her breathing has improved." Grace's knees buckled. Daniel caught her again, holding her upright. "What happened?" Daniel asked. "What was wrong with her?" Dr. Owusu's expression grew serious. "Severe pneumonia," he said. "Complicated by malnutrition and pre-existing weakness in her lungs. If you had come even an hour later—" He didn't finish the sentence. Daniel felt cold. "Can we see her?" Grace asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes, but she needs rest. Don't overwhelm her." Grace nodded and moved toward the doors. Daniel started to follow, then stopped. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something." Dr. Owusu waited. "How bad is it?" Daniel asked. "The truth, not the version you tell patients, the truth." The doctor studied him for a moment. "The truth is that these children have been surviving on very little for a very long time," he said. "Their bodies are strong, but they are at a breaking point. Without proper nutrition, regular medical care, and a stable environment, episodes like tonight will keep happening. And eventually one of them won't be survivable." Daniel absorbed the words like blows. "What do they need?" "Everything," Dr. Owusu replied simply. "They need everything they haven't had." Daniel nodded slowly. "They'll have it," he said. "Whatever it costs. They'll have it." The doctor looked at him carefully. "Money can buy medicine," he said. "It can buy food. It can buy comfort. But it cannot buy presence. These children need more than resources, Mr. Mensah. They need someone who will be there." "I understand." "Do you?" Dr. Owusu asked gently. "Because presence is harder than money. It requires sacrifice. It requires patience. It requires showing up, even when you don't want to." Daniel met his eyes. "I'll be there." The doctor nodded. "Then perhaps there is hope." Daniel found Grace standing beside Akua's bed. The little girl looked impossibly small beneath the white sheets. Tubes connected to her arms. Monitors beeped softly in the darkness. Her breathing was steady now, slow and even, but the fragility of her body was undeniable. Grace held Aqua's hand, her thumb stroking the child's palm in a rhythm that spoke of countless nights spent exactly like this. "She looks so small," Daniel said quietly, stepping beside her. Grace didn't look up. "She's always been small," she said, "even when she was born. The midwife said she might not survive the night, but she did. She always does." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I should have been there." Grace said nothing. "I should have been there when they were born." Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "I should have been there for their first steps, their first words, their first fevers. I should have been there for all of it." Grace finally looked at him. "Yes," she said simply. "You should have." The words carried no anger, no accusation, just the weight of undeniable truth. Daniel closed his eyes. "How do you not hate me?" he asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. "I did hate you," she admitted. "For years. I hated you every time they asked about their father. I hated you every time I couldn't afford medicine. I hated you every time I went to bed hungry so they could eat." She paused. "But hate is exhausting. And I didn't have energy to spare. So I learned to let it go. Not for your sake. For mine." Daniel opened his eyes. "And now?" Grace looked at Aqua's sleeping face. "Now I don't know what I feel," she said. "But I know this: you're here tonight. You showed up when it mattered. That means something." "Does it?" "It's a start," Grace said quietly. "It doesn't erase the past, but it's a start." Adwoa appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is Akua okay?" she asked. Grace held out her hand. "She's sleeping. Come sit with us." Adwoa crossed the room and climbed into the chair beside her mother. She looked at Daniel, then at Akua, then back at Daniel. "You stayed," she said. "I told you I would." Adwoa nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. Then she leaned her head against her mother's shoulder and closed her eyes. Daniel watched them. This family he had abandoned, this family that had survived without him, this family that was slowly, carefully allowing him back in. He made a silent vow: never again. He would never let them face the darkness alone again. The next 3 days were a blur of hospital routines and sleepless nights. Daniel stayed. He slept in the chair beside Akua's bed. He brought food for Grace and Adwoa. He spoke with doctors, asked questions, took notes. He did everything he could think of to be useful. Grace watched him with guarded eyes. She did not thank him. She did not praise him. But she did not push him away either. On the second day, Cynthia appeared. She walked into the hospital like she owned it, heels clicking designer bag, swinging sunglasses perched on her head despite the fluorescent lighting. She scanned the corridor until her eyes landed on Daniel. "There you are," she said, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea how long I've been looking for you?" Daniel stood slowly. "Cynthia, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" She laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "What are you doing here? You disappeared for 3 days. Your phone is off. Your staff doesn't know where you are. I had to track you down through your driver." "My daughter was sick." Cynthia's expression flickered. "Your daughter," she repeated. "So it's confirmed now. They're really yours." "Yes." She folded her arms. "And you've been here the whole time, playing nurse." "I've been here because my child almost died," Daniel said, his voice hardening. "I've been here because it's where I needed to be." Cynthia shook her head. "Do you hear yourself? A week ago, you didn't even know these children existed? Now, suddenly, they're your whole world." "They were always my world," Daniel replied quietly. "I just didn't know it." Cynthia stared at him. "You're throwing everything away," she said. "Your reputation, your business, our future. For what? A woman who couldn't even—" "Don't—" Daniel interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't finish that sentence." Cynthia's eyes widened slightly. "You're defending her again." "I'm defending my family." The word hung in the air between them. "Family." Cynthia's face twisted. "Family," she repeated. "They're not your family, Daniel. They're strangers. A woman you haven't seen in 10 years and 2 children who don't even know your name." "They know my name," Daniel said. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure they know I was worth waiting for." Cynthia laughed again, this time with an edge of hysteria. "This is insane. You're insane." "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "But I'd rather be insane than continue living a lie." She stared at him for a long moment, her composure cracking. "Fine," she said finally. "If this is what you want, if you'd rather play father to children you just met than build a future with me, then fine. I'm done." "Cynthia." "No." She cut him off. "You made your choice. Don't pretend you didn't." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing through the corridor until the sound disappeared entirely. Daniel stood motionless, watching her go. He felt nothing. No regret, no second-guessing, no desire to call her back, only clarity. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Grace appeared beside him. "She's gone?" she asked quietly. "Yes." Grace nodded slowly. "She wasn't wrong, you know," she said, "about what you're giving up." Daniel turned to face her. "She was wrong about everything that matters," he replied. Grace studied him for a long moment. "You really are different now," she said. "I keep waiting for the old Daniel to come back, the one who always chose himself first. But he hasn't shown up." "He's gone," Daniel said. "I killed him." Grace almost smiled. "Good," she said. "I never liked him anyway." On the 4th day, Akua woke up fully. She opened her eyes, slowly blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling, then turned her head to find Daniel sitting beside her bed. "Hi," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward. "Hi yourself. How do you feel?" "Tired," Akua admitted. "And hungry." Daniel laughed, a genuine sound full of relief. "Hungry is good. Hungry means you're getting better." Akua looked around the room. "Where's Mama?" She went to get food. She'll be back soon. Akua nodded, then looked back at Daniel. You stayed, she said softly. I told you I would. I know, but I didn't believe you. Daniel felt the words cut deep. I understand, he said carefully. I haven't given you any reason to believe me. Akua was quiet for a moment. Mama says actions matter more than words, she said finally. She says people can say anything, but what they do is what's real. Your mama is very wise. I know, Akua agreed. She's the wisest person I know. Daniel smiled. Then I'll have to work hard to prove myself to both of you. Akua considered this. Yes, she said seriously. You will. Grace returned a few minutes later, carrying a small tray of food. Her face softened when she saw Akua awake and talking. There's my girl, she said, setting the tray down. You scared us. I'm sorry, Mama. Don't be sorry, just get better. Akua reached for her mother's hand. Is he staying? She asked, glancing at Daniel. Grace looked at Daniel, then back at her daughter. He says he is, she replied carefully. Do you believe him? Grace hesitated. I'm trying to, she admitted. Akua nodded, satisfied with the answer. Okay, she said. Then I'll try too. Daniel felt something crack open inside him, something that had been locked away for years. He blinked rapidly, fighting back tears he hadn't known he was capable of. Thank you, he managed. Akua looked at him with those serious, knowing eyes. Don't thank me yet, she said. You still have to prove it. The words echoed what Grace had told him days earlier. Prove it. Daniel nodded. I will, he promised. And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Akua was discharged from the hospital on the 7th day. Daniel carried her to the car himself, ignoring the nurses who offered wheelchairs. He wanted to feel her weight in his arms, this small life he had almost lost before he even had a chance to know her. Grace walked beside him, Adwoa's hand in hers. Neither of them spoke. The relief was too heavy for words. When they reached the car, Daniel paused. I've arranged somewhere for you to stay, he said carefully. Not a hotel, not anything fancy, just a house near the clinic. Clean, safe, close enough for checkups. Grace stiffened. I didn't ask for that. I know, Daniel replied. But Akua needs stability. She needs proper rest. The doctor was clear about that. Grace looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. This feels like too much, she said quietly. It's temporary, Daniel assured her. Only until Akua is stronger. After that, you decide what happens next. Grace glanced at Adwoa, then at Akua in Daniel's arms. The little girl had fallen asleep, her head resting against his shoulder, her breathing slow and even. Fine, Grace said finally, but on my terms. Always. She nodded once, then climbed into the car without another word. The house was modest, just as Daniel had promised. 3 small rooms, clean floors, running water, electricity that didn't flicker. By village standards, it was comfortable. By any standard, it was a universe away from the crumbling structure Grace had called home for the past 6 years. Grace walked through the rooms, slowly running her hand along the walls, testing the taps, checking the locks. Daniel watched from the doorway, saying nothing. Finally, she turned to face him. How much is this costing you? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Daniel hesitated. Less than I spend on a single business dinner, he admitted. This is nothing, Grace. Less than nothing. She flinched at his words. For you, maybe, she said quietly. For us, this is everything. Daniel felt the weight of her statement settle into his bones. I know, he said. That's why I wanted to do it. Grace studied him for a moment. I don't want to owe you. You don't owe me anything, Daniel replied firmly. I owe you. I owe them. This isn't charity, it's responsibility. Grace's expression didn't soften, but something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. "All right," she said. "We'll stay. For now." The first week in the new house was strange for everyone. Adwoa and Akua explored every corner, opening cupboards, testing light switches, marveling at water that came from taps instead of basins. They had never lived anywhere with electricity that worked all day. Grace moved through the space cautiously, as if expecting it to be taken away at any moment. She cooked simple meals, kept the rooms spotless, and watched the door each evening, as if waiting for someone to come and tell her it was all a mistake. Daniel visited every day, but he did not stay overnight. He understood boundaries. He understood that trust was not rebuilt with grand gestures, but with small, consistent actions. Each morning he arrived before sunrise. He helped with breakfast. He drove Akua to her checkups. He sat with Adwoa while she practiced reading from an old school book Grace had found somewhere. He asked before doing anything. He waited for permission. He followed Grace's lead. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. One evening, 2 weeks after they moved in, Daniel arrived to find Grace sitting alone on the small porch. The girls were inside already asleep. "Can I sit?" he asked. Grace nodded. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds around them. "You're different," Grace said finally. Daniel glanced at her. "Different how?" "The Daniel I knew would have tried to fix everything by now," she explained. "He would have made decisions without asking. He would have assumed he knew best. The Daniel you knew was an idiot." Grace almost smiled. "Yes, he was." Daniel leaned back against the wall. "I've been thinking about what the doctor said," he admitted, "about presents being harder than money." "And he was right," Daniel said. "I've spent 10 years thinking that success meant building something bigger than everyone else. More money, more power, more control. But none of that matters if you don't have anyone to share it with." Grace looked at him. "Is that what this is? You trying to find someone to share it with?" "No," Daniel said carefully. "This is me trying to make up for the time I wasted. I can't get those years back. I can't undo the damage, but I can show up now. I can be here. I can try to be the father I should have been from the beginning." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "The girls are starting to trust you," she said finally. Daniel felt his chest tighten. "Are they?" "Akua asked about you this morning. She wanted to know if you were coming." Daniel's throat constricted. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," Grace replied. "That I didn't know, that you're trying, that we'll see." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair." "I'm not ready to trust you completely," Grace continued. "I may never be, but I can see that you're trying, and that matters." Daniel turned to face her. "What would it take," he asked, "for you to trust me?" Grace considered the question. "Time," she said. "Consistency. Showing up when it's hard, not just when it's easy. Keeping promises, even when no one is watching." "I can do that." "Maybe," Grace replied. "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was something. And for now, something was enough. The weeks that followed tested Daniel in ways he hadn't anticipated. His business demanded attention. Deals were waiting. Investors were growing impatient. His board sent increasingly urgent messages, asking when he would return to the city. Daniel read the messages, then set his phone aside, and went to help Akua with her breathing exercises. One afternoon, his phone rang with a call from Marcus, his longest-serving business partner. "Daniel," Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "The Okonkwo deal is falling apart. They're threatening to pull out if you don't show up for the meeting next week." Daniel closed his eyes. The Okonkwo deal was worth millions. It was the culmination of months of negotiation. Losing it would be a significant blow to his company. "Can we reschedule?" Daniel asked. "I've already rescheduled twice," Marcus replied. "They're done waiting." It's now or never. Daniel looked across the room at Akua, who was sitting at the table with Adwoa, both of them focused on a drawing they were making together. Grace stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. This was what he had missed for 10 years. This ordinary precious moment. Then let them walk, Daniel said. Silence on the other end of the line. What? Marcus finally managed. Let them walk, Daniel repeated. If they can't wait another week, then the partnership was never going to work anyway. Daniel, this is a multi-million-dollar deal. You can't just... I can, Daniel interrupted calmly. And I am. Handle what you can. Delegate the rest. I'll be back when I'm ready. He ended the call before Marcus could respond. Grace had stopped cooking. She stood in the kitchen doorway watching him. That sounded important, she said carefully. It was. You turned it down. Yes. Grace's brow furrowed. Why? Daniel looked at her, then at the girls, then back at her. Because some things are more important than money, he said simply. Grace stared at him for a long moment. You really have changed, she said quietly. I'm trying to. She nodded slowly, then turned back to the kitchen without another word. But Daniel saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of belief. 3 weeks after Akua's discharge, Daniel drove the family to the clinic for her final checkup. Dr. Owusu examined Akua, thoroughly checking her lungs, her heart, her weight. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Daniel and Grace. She's improving, he said. Her lungs are stronger, her weight is up. The pneumonia hasn't returned. Grace closed her eyes, relief flooding her face. Thank God, she whispered. This is what consistent care looks like. Dr. Owusu continued. Proper nutrition, regular checkups, a stable environment. If you continue like this, she should make a full recovery. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you, doctor. Dr. Owusu nodded, then looked at both of them carefully. I want to be honest with you, he said. The damage from years of malnutrition doesn't disappear overnight. Akua will need continued monitoring. She may face challenges as she grows. But with the right support, there's no reason she can't live a normal, healthy life. Grace reached for Akua's hand. She'll have everything she needs, she said firmly. I'll make sure of it. Daniel spoke up. We'll make sure of it, he corrected gently. Grace looked at him. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Then she nodded. We'll make sure of it, she agreed. On the drive home, Akua fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against Adwoa's shoulder. Adwoa stayed awake, watching the road pass through the window. Daddy, she said suddenly. Daniel's heart stopped. He glanced at Grace, who had gone very still. Yes. Daniel managed his voice barely steady. Are you going to stay with us forever? The question hung in the air, heavy with hope and fear. Daniel pulled the car to the side of the road. He turned around to face Adwoa directly. I want to, he said honestly, but I know I hurt you before. I know I wasn't there when I should have been, so I can't promise forever until I've proven that I mean it. Adwoa considered this. How long will that take? I don't know, Daniel admitted. Maybe a long time, maybe your whole life. That's a lot of proving. Yes, it is. Adwoa studied his face. Okay, she said finally. Then start now. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. I already have, he said. Adwoa nodded satisfied. Good, she said. Because Akua really wants a daddy. She just won't say it. Daniel turned back to the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel to hide their trembling. Beside him, Grace was silent. But when he glanced at her, he saw tears running down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She didn't try to hide them. She simply let them fall. That night, after the girls were asleep, Grace found Daniel sitting on the porch alone. She sat down beside him without speaking. They stayed like that for a long time, listening to the sounds of the night. Finally, Grace spoke. "She called you Daddy." Daniel nodded. "I wasn't expecting that." "Neither was I." Grace turned to look at him. "How did it feel?" Daniel considered the question. "Terrifying," he admitted. "And wonderful, and like something I didn't deserve." Grace was quiet for a moment. "I've been protecting them for so long," she said. "From everything. From disappointment, from hope, from the possibility that their father might come back and then leave again. I won't leave. I know you believe that. But you don't?" Grace sighed. "I believe you're trying," she said. "I believe you mean it right now. But I've seen what happens when things get hard, when the excitement fades, when responsibility becomes routine. You think I'll walk away again?" "I think it's possible," Grace admitted, "and I have to protect them from that possibility." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said. "I haven't earned your trust yet." "No, you haven't." Daniel turned to face her. "Then what do I do?" he asked. "How do I prove that this is real?" Grace looked at him for a long moment. "Keep showing up," she said finally. "Not just on the good days, on the bad days too. When Akua is sick and crying and you haven't slept. When Adwoa is angry and won't talk to you. When I push you away because I'm scared." She paused. "That's how you prove it, not with words, with presence." Daniel took a deep breath. "I can do that." "Maybe," Grace replied. "We'll see." She stood up to go inside, then paused at the door. "Daniel." "Yes." "Thank you for being here, for trying. I don't say it often enough." Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I'm doing what I should have done from the beginning." Grace nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm thanking you." She went inside, leaving Daniel alone with the night and his thoughts. He sat there for a long time, thinking about all the years he had wasted, all the moments he had missed, all the damage he had caused by choosing pride over truth. He couldn't change the past, but he could change what happened next. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He called his board and announced that he was stepping back from day-to-day operations. He would remain as chairman, but he would no longer be running the company directly. He trusted his team to handle things. The reaction was immediate and intense. "You're making a mistake," Marcus warned him. "You built this company. Walking away now?" "I'm not walking away," Daniel interrupted. "I'm choosing what matters most." "And what matters most?" Daniel looked out the window at Grace and the girls who were playing some kind of game in the yard. Aqua was laughing. Adwoa was trying to be serious but couldn't stop smiling. Grace watched them both, her face softer than Daniel had ever seen it. "Family," Daniel said. "Family matters most." He ended the call and walked outside to join them. That evening, Daniel sat with Akua while Grace prepared dinner. "Daddy," Akua said, still trying out the word. "Yes." "Do you have a house?" Daniel smiled. "Yes, a big one, in the city." "Is it nice?" "It's comfortable," Daniel replied. "But it's empty. No one lives there except me." Akua frowned. "That sounds lonely." "It is," Daniel admitted. "Very lonely." Akua was quiet for a moment. "Maybe we could visit sometime," she said carefully. "So you're not lonely." Daniel felt his heart crack open. "I would like that very much," he said. Akua smiled a real smile, the kind that transformed her whole face. "Okay," she said. "Then we will." Later, after the girls were in bed, Daniel told Grace about the conversation. "She wants to visit my house," he said. "She's worried I'm lonely." Grace's expression was unreadable. "What did you tell her?" "That I would like that." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "This is moving fast," she said finally. I know. I'm not ready for them to see your world, the cars, the money, the people. I understand. They're just starting to feel safe here, Grace continued. I don't want to confuse them. Daniel nodded. Then we wait, he said. As long as you need. Grace looked at him. You're not going to argue? No. You're not going to tell me I'm being overprotective? No. Daniel repeated. You're their mother. You know what they need. I'm just trying to be here for whatever that looks like. Grace studied him for a long moment. Who are you? She asked quietly. You look like Daniel. You sound like Daniel. But you don't act like the man I remember. The man you remember was afraid, Daniel said. Afraid of failure, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of admitting he was wrong. And now I'm afraid of something else, Daniel admitted. I'm afraid of losing them again. I'm afraid of waking up one day and realizing I wasted another 10 years. Grace's expression softened slightly. Fear can be useful, she said, if it makes you do the right thing. I hope so. She stood up and walked toward the door. Daniel. Yes. The girls have their first day of school next week, she said. I was going to walk them there. But if you wanted to come? Daniel's heart leaped. I'd like that, he said quickly. Very much. Grace nodded. Okay, she said. We'll go together. She went inside. Daniel sat alone on the porch looking up at the stars. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The morning of the girls' first day of school arrived faster than Daniel expected. He woke before dawn, unable to sleep. He dressed carefully, simple clothes, nothing flashy, and drove to Grace's house as the first light crept over the horizon. Grace was already awake when he arrived. She stood in the doorway watching him approach. You're early, she said. I couldn't sleep. She almost smiled. Neither could they. Inside, Adwoa and Akua were sitting at the table in matching dresses Grace had sewn herself. Their hair was neatly braided. Their faces were scrubbed clean. Their eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Daddy! Akua called when she saw him. The word still made Daniel's heart skip. Good morning, he said, crouching down to their level. Are you ready for your big day? Adwoa nodded seriously. Mama says school is important. Your mama is right. Akua fidgeted with the hem of her dress. What if the other children don't like us? Daniel reached out and took her small hand in his. Then they're missing out on knowing two of the most amazing girls in the world. Akua giggled. You have to say that. You're our daddy. I say it because it's true. Grace watched them from the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. But Daniel saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, something that looked almost like peace. We should go, she said finally. We don't want to be late. They walked to the school together, all four of them, through streets that were slowly coming to life. Vendors opened their stalls. Children ran past laughing. Women carried baskets on their heads, calling greetings to neighbors. Daniel walked beside Grace close enough to feel her presence, but not so close that he crowded her. Adwoa and Akua walked ahead holding hands, their small voices chattering with nervous excitement. They look happy, Daniel said quietly. Grace nodded. They are happy, for the first time in a long time. Because of school. Because they feel safe, Grace corrected. Children can sense when things are stable, when they don't have to worry about tomorrow. Daniel absorbed her words. I want them to always feel that way. Grace glanced at him. Then keep showing up. I will. At the school gate, other parents were gathering with their children. Some stared openly at Daniel. His clothes were simple, but his bearing gave him away. He was clearly not from here. Grace stiffened slightly, sensing the attention. People are looking, she murmured. Let them look. They'll talk. Let them talk. Grace turned to face him. You don't care? I care about exactly 4 people in this world, Daniel said quietly. 2 of them are about to walk through that gate. 1 of them is standing beside me. The 4th is myself, and I'm learning to care about him less. Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a small sound almost startled out of her, but it was real. The first genuine laugh Daniel had heard from her since he returned. What? He asked. Nothing, she said, shaking her head. It's just, you really have changed. Is that good? I'm still deciding. Adwoa turned back to them impatient. Mama, Daddy, come on. Daniel's chest tightened at the easy way she said it. Mama, Daddy. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. They walked the girls to their classroom. Akua clung to Grace's hand, suddenly shy. Adwoa stood straight, trying to look brave. The teacher, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Asante, welcomed them warmly. These must be the Mensa twins, she said, smiling. We've been expecting you. Adwoa looked up at Daniel. Will you be here when school ends? Yes, Daniel promised. I'll be waiting right at that gate. Promise. Promise. Adwoa nodded, satisfied. Then she took Akua's hand and led her sister into the classroom without looking back. Grace watched them go, her eyes glistening. They didn't cry, she said softly. No. Last year when I tried to send Adwoa to a village school for a few weeks, she cried every morning. She was afraid I wouldn't come back. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat, and now she believes someone will be waiting for her. They stood in silence for a moment, watching through the window as Adwoa and Akua found seats together. Akua was still nervous, but Adwoa had her arm around her sister, protective as always. Thank you, Grace said suddenly. Daniel turned to her, surprised. For what? For being here. For letting them believe. Daniel shook his head. Don't thank me for doing what I should have done all along. Grace looked at him directly. I'm thanking you anyway. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Daniel walked the girls to school every morning and waited for them every afternoon. He helped with homework. He cooked meals when Grace was tired. He learned to braid hair badly at first, then better because Akua asked him to. He didn't make grand gestures. He didn't try to buy their love with expensive gifts. He simply showed up day after day, doing the small things that added up to presents. 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. Daniel's business continued to run without him. He checked in occasionally, delegated more than he ever had before, and discovered that the empire he had built could survive without his constant attention. The world didn't end when he stopped controlling it. One evening, 3 months after school started, Nana Ya came to visit. The old woman appeared at their door without warning, her walking stick tapping against the ground as she approached. Grace rushed to greet her. Nana, I didn't know you were coming. I came to see for myself, Nana Ya replied. The village is full of rumors. I wanted to know the truth. She stepped inside and looked around the small house, clean, comfortable, filled with signs of family life. Children's drawings on the walls, shoes by the door, the smell of food cooking in the kitchen. Then her eyes landed on Daniel, who had risen from his chair. So, Nana Ya said slowly, you're still here. Yes, Nana. How long has it been now? 3 months. The old woman nodded her expression, giving nothing away. Sit, she commanded. Both of you. They sat. Nana Ya lowered herself into a chair, her sharp eyes moving between them. I have seen many men make promises, she said. Young men, old men, rich men, poor men. They all say the same things. I will change. I will be different. I will stay. She paused. Most of them are liars. Daniel said nothing. He understood this was not the time to speak. But actions cannot lie. Nana Ya continued. I have been watching, listening. People in the village tell me things. They say you walk your children to school. They say you cook. They say you wait at the gate every afternoon like a common father. I am a common father, Daniel said quietly. Nothing more. Nana Ya studied him. No, she said finally. You are not common. A common man would have walked away long ago. A common man would have sent money and considered his duty done. She leaned forward. What you are doing is harder. What you are doing requires something that cannot be bought. What is that? Humility. Nana Ya replied. The willingness to be small, the courage to admit you were wrong. Daniel met her eyes. I was wrong, he said. About everything. I left when I should have stayed. I believed lies when I should have trusted truth. I built an empire while my children went hungry. His voice cracked. I can never make up for that. But I can try to be different now. Nana Ya was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Grace. And you, my child, what do you say? Grace hesitated. I'm still learning to trust him, she admitted. Part of me is always waiting for him to leave, but he hasn't left yet. And every day he stays, that part gets smaller. Nana Ya nodded slowly. Trust is like a plant, she said. It grows slowly. It needs constant care. But once it takes root, it becomes strong. She looked at both of them. You have planted something here. Whether it grows or dies depends on what you do next. What should we do? Daniel asked. Nana Ya smiled the first smile she had given him since he returned. Keep watering, she said simply. Before she left, Nana Ya asked to see the girls. Adwoa and Akua came running when Grace called them. They stopped short when they saw the old woman suddenly shy. Come here, Nana Ya said gently. Let me look at you. The girls approached slowly. Nana Ya took their hands in hers, examining their faces, their eyes, their expressions. You look healthy, she said. Stronger than before. We eat good food now, Akua offered. Daddy makes breakfast. Nana Ya glanced at Daniel. Does he? He's not very good at it, Adwoa added honestly. But he's getting better. Daniel laughed despite himself. Fair enough. Nana Ya released the girls' hands and looked at them seriously. Your father made mistakes, she said. Big mistakes. But he is trying to fix them. Do you understand what that means? Adwoa nodded. It means he's sorry. It means more than that, Nana Ya corrected. It means he loves you enough to change. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone is brave enough. She looked at Daniel. Remember that, she said. When you are tired, when you want to give up, remember that changing is the bravest thing a man can do. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. I will remember. Nana Ya stood slowly reaching for her walking stick. I will tell the village what I have seen, she said. I will tell them that Daniel Mensah has come home not as a rich man showing off his success, but as a father learning to love. She paused at the door. That is a story worth telling. 6 months after he returned, Daniel made another decision. He gathered Grace and the girls one evening after dinner. I want to do something, he said carefully. But I need your permission first. Grace's expression grew guarded. What is it? I want to build a clinic in the village, Daniel said. A real clinic with proper equipment and medicine, so that no child has to suffer the way Akua suffered. Grace stared at him. A clinic. And a scholarship fund, Daniel continued. For children in the village, especially girls, so they can go to school even if their families can't afford it. Daniel. I'm not doing this to show off, he said quickly. I'm not doing this to make myself look good. I'm doing this because I have the resources to help, and I've wasted them for too long. Grace was quiet for a moment. Why are you asking my permission? Because this affects you, Daniel replied. It affects the village. It affects how people see our family. I won't do anything that makes your life harder." Grace looked at him for a long time. Then she turned to the girls. "What do you think?" Adwoa spoke up immediately. "I think it's a good idea. Other children shouldn't be sick like Akua was." Akua nodded. "And they should have books. I like books now." Grace turned back to Daniel. "You're really asking," she said slowly. "You're not just telling me what you've decided." "I'm asking." She studied his face. "The man I married would have announced this at a big event with photographers and speeches about his own generosity. That man is gone." "I know," Grace said quietly. "That's why I'm saying yes." Daniel felt something release in his chest. "Thank you. But if you do this, you do it properly," Grace continued. "No shortcuts, no half measures, and you listen to what the community actually needs, not what you think they need." "Agreed. And one more thing." "Anything." Grace held his gaze. "If you put your name on it, I will never forgive you." Daniel smiled. "No names," he promised. "Just help." The clinic took 8 months to build. Daniel worked with local leaders, listened to community input, and made sure every decision served the people rather than his ego. He hired doctors from the region. He stocked the pharmacy with essential medicines. He made sure no one would ever be turned away because they couldn't pay. The school expansion took longer, nearly a year, but when it opened, every child in the village had a place. Daniel was there for the opening, but he didn't make a speech. He didn't cut a ribbon. He simply stood at the back of the crowd, holding Akua's hand, watching as children streamed through the doors of a building that would change their lives. Adwoa tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, yes. Is this what you're supposed to do? Build things that help people?" Daniel considered the question. "It's what I should have been doing all along," he said. Grace stood beside him, her expression thoughtful. "The village is different now," she said quietly. "Because of you." "Because of us," Daniel corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Grace looked at him. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I know it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she did something she had never done before. She reached out and took his hand. Daniel froze. He didn't move. He barely breathed. Grace's fingers were calloused from years of hard work. Her grip was firm but gentle. "I'm still not ready to trust you completely," she said. "I know. But I'm getting closer." Daniel turned to face her. "How close?" Grace looked at him. Really looked at him, and for the first time he saw something beyond caution in her eyes. "Close enough to try," she said. That night after the girls were asleep, Daniel and Grace sat together on the porch. The distance between them was smaller than it had ever been. The silence was comfortable instead of careful. "I've been thinking," Grace said finally. "About what?" "About us. About what happens next." Daniel's heart beat faster. "And?" Grace turned to look at him. "When you first came back, I was sure you would leave again. I was waiting for it. Every morning I woke up expecting to find you gone. I'm still here." "I know," Grace said. "That's what I've been thinking about." She paused. "You've been here for over a year now. You've walked our children to school hundreds of times. You've held Akua when she was sick. You've listened to Adwoa's dreams about becoming a doctor. You've cooked terrible breakfasts and slowly made them better." Daniel smiled faintly. "They're still not very good." "No," Grace agreed. "They're not." Her expression grew serious. "A year ago, I told you that proving yourself would take time, maybe a long time, maybe your whole life." "I remember. I thought trust would come gradually," Grace continued. "A little more each day until one day I woke up and realized I believed in you again." She shook her head. "But that's not how it happened." Daniel held his breath. "It happened this morning," Grace said. "I was watching you with the girls before school. You were braiding Akua's hair badly as always, and she was laughing at you. Adwoa was giving you instructions like she was the parent, and you were the child. She paused. And I realized I wasn't waiting for you to leave anymore. I was just watching my family. Daniel felt tears slide down his cheeks. He didn't try to hide them. Grace, I'm not saying everything is fixed, she continued. I'm not saying I've forgotten the past. The years you weren't here, those years still happened. They still hurt. I know. But I'm saying I forgive you. The words hit Daniel like a wave. You forgive me. Grace nodded slowly. I forgive you for leaving. I forgive you for believing lies. I forgive you for not being there when I needed you most. She reached out and touched his face. And I forgive myself for being so afraid to let you back in. Daniel pulled her close, holding her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat against his own. I don't deserve this, he whispered. No, Grace agreed. You don't, but you've earned it. That's different. They held each other for a long time, not speaking, not needing to. Finally, Grace pulled back slightly. There's something else, she said. What? The girls have been asking when we're going to be a real family. Daniel's heart pounded. What did you tell them? I told them I didn't know, Grace replied. But now I do. She looked at him directly. I want us to be a family, Daniel. A real one. Not because you're rich. Not because you built a clinic or a school. But because you became the man I always hoped you could be. Daniel could barely speak. Are you saying? I'm saying yes, Grace interrupted. To whatever comes next. To building a life together. To being partners, real partners in raising our daughters. She smiled a real smile, full and bright. I'm saying yes to you. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends gathered in the yard of the house that had become their home. Nana Ya performed the traditional blessing. Mr. Kofi stood beside Daniel as his witness. The girls scattered flowers and giggled through the entire ceremony. There were no photographers, no press announcements, no grand displays of wealth, just two people who had found their way back to each other. After the ceremony, Adwoa pulled Daniel aside. Daddy, yes. Does this mean you're staying forever now? Daniel knelt down to her level. Yes, he said. It means I'm staying forever. Adwoa studied his face carefully the way she always did when she was deciding whether to believe something. Good, she said finally. Because Akua was worried. She kept asking me if wedding means staying. Daniel felt his chest tighten. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know, Adwoa admitted. But I hoped so. Daniel pulled her into a hug. You don't have to hope anymore, he said. Now you can know. Adwoa hugged him back tightly. Okay, she whispered. Now I know. Akua found them a moment later, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, Mama is looking for you. Daniel stood up, taking both girls' hands in his. Then let's go find her together. They walked across the yard as a family, father, daughter, toward the woman who had survived without him and forgiven him anyway. Grace was standing with Nana Ya, but she turned when she saw them approaching. Her face softened into an expression Daniel had never seen before, something beyond happiness, beyond peace. Something like home. There you are, she said. Here we are, Daniel replied. He released the girl's hands and stepped toward Grace. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving me another chance. Grace shook her head. You gave yourself another chance, she corrected, by becoming someone worth trusting. I'm still learning. I know, Grace said. So am I. Nana Ya watched them with satisfied eyes. This is what the village will remember, she said. Not the clinic, not the school, but this. A family that healed itself. Daniel looked at her. I couldn't have done it alone. No one heals alone, Nana Ya replied. That is the lesson most people never learn. She placed her weathered hand on Daniel's shoulder. Remember what I told you when you first returned? You told me that promises are seeds. Yes. And look what has grown. She gestured at the yard around them, the modest house, the happy children, the woman who had once carried firewood alone. You planted something real, Nanaya said. You tended it. You watched it grow. This is your harvest, Daniel Mensah. Not the empire you built in the city. This. Daniel felt tears slip down his face again. Thank you, Nana, for being patient with me. Patience is easy, she replied. What is hard is change, and you did the hard thing. The years that followed were not perfect. There were arguments. There were misunderstandings. There were moments when the old wounds reopened and had to be healed again. But there was also laughter. There was joy. There were ordinary mornings that felt like miracles because everyone was together. Daniel kept his promise. He showed up every day, not just for the celebrations, but for the difficult moments. When Akua struggled with nightmares about being sick, he sat beside her bed until she fell asleep. When Adwoa faced bullies at school who mocked her for having a father who suddenly appeared, he taught her how to stand tall without fighting back. Grace kept her promise too. She let him in slowly, carefully, completely. She stopped waiting for him to leave. She stopped bracing for disappointment. She learned to lean on him the way she had once leaned only on herself. When Adwoa turned 16, she announced that she wanted to become a doctor. I want to help people like Dr. Owusu helped Akua, she explained. I want to make sure no child has to be scared the way I was scared. Daniel looked at Grace, his eyes glistening. She's going to be amazing. She already is, Grace replied. When Akua turned 18, she published her first book, a collection of stories about a girl who grew up poor but refused to stop dreaming. I dedicated it to you, she told Daniel. Both of you. Daniel opened the book and read the dedication. To my mother who taught me that strength is quiet, and to my father who taught me that it's never too late to come home. He couldn't speak for a long time. Thank you, he finally managed. Akua smiled. Thank you for giving me something to write about. Adwoa graduated from medical school at the top of her class. Daniel sat in the audience, openly weeping as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Grace sat beside him, her own tears streaming down her face. We did it, Grace whispered. You did it, Daniel corrected. You raised her. You kept her alive. You gave her everything she needed to become this. Grace shook her head. We did it together. After the ceremony, Adwoa found them in the crowd. I have something for you, she said. She handed Daniel a small framed photograph, a picture of all four of them taken years ago on the girls' first day of school. I've kept this with me every day since then, Adwoa explained. Through every exam, every sleepless night, every moment I wanted to give up. Daniel looked at the photograph, Grace standing proud, the girls beaming himself, looking slightly bewildered, as if he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to be there. Why this picture? He asked. Because this is the day I knew everything would be okay, Adwoa replied. This is the day I stopped being afraid. She hugged him tightly. Thank you for not leaving, Daddy. Thank you for staying. Daniel held his daughter, this brilliant, compassionate, strong young woman, and felt something he had never expected to feel. Completeness. Not because he had achieved success, not because he had built wealth or influence or power, but because he had been there, because he had shown up, because he had earned the right to be called daddy by two girls who had once looked at him like a stranger. On his 60th birthday, Daniel returned to the village. The clinic he had built was thriving. The school had expanded twice. Children who had once gone without were now graduating, pursuing dreams, building lives their parents could never have imagined. Daniel walked through the streets where he had once stood in shame, carrying nothing but broken dreams. Now people called his name with warmth. They thanked him for what he had done. They asked about his daughters. He stopped at the place on the road where he had first seen Grace carrying firewood. She was waiting for him there as if she had known he would come. "Remembering?" she asked. "Always." Grace took his hand. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Any of it," she said. "The money you gave up, the deals you walked away from, the empire you let others run." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not for 1 second." Grace smiled. "Neither do I." They stood together on the dusty road, two people who had been broken and found their way back to each other. "I used to carry firewood on this road," Grace said quietly. "I used to wonder if anyone would ever see me, really see me." "I see you," Daniel replied. "I've always seen you. I was just too blind to know it." Grace leaned her head against his shoulder. "We made it," she said. "We made it." That evening, Adwoa and Akua arrived with their own families. Husbands, children, lives full of purpose and joy. Daniel sat in the yard, surrounded by grandchildren he had never expected to have, listening to stories about medical cases and book tours and all the dreams that had come true. Grace sat beside him, her hand in his, her smile bright and unguarded. Nana Ya had passed away 3 years earlier, but her words still echoed in Daniel's mind. "Promises are seeds. What grows depends on how you tend them." He had tended his promises. He had watered them with presence, nurtured them with patience, protected them through every storm. And now he sat in his harvest. Not wealth, not fame, not the empire he had once built. Family, love, belonging. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Daniel walked outside alone. He looked up at the stars, the same stars he had once counted with Grace when they were young and poor and full of hope. "I made it," he whispered to no one in particular. "I actually made it." Grace's voice came from behind him. "Talking to yourself again?" He turned and smiled. "Just grateful." She walked toward him and took his hand. "For what?" "For you," Daniel said simply. "For the girls. For every single day I got to wake up and be part of this family." Grace looked at him for a long moment. "Do you remember what you said to me the day you came back?" "I said a lot of things." "You said you wouldn't walk away again." Daniel nodded. "I meant it." "I know," Grace said. "You proved it, every single day for 23 years. She reached up and touched his face. "I'm proud of you, Daniel Mensah. I'm proud of the man you became." Daniel felt tears slip down his cheeks, not from sadness, but from something far deeper. "I became that man because of you," he said. "Because you gave me a chance to be better. Because you forgave me when I didn't deserve it." "You earned it," Grace corrected. "That's what matters." They stood together under the stars, two people who had been broken and found their way back whole. Not because the world was kind, not because life was easy, but because they chose each other. Every single day. And that choice made all the difference. The last bundle of firewood Grace ever carried still sat in the corner of their home, preserved untouched, a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. Sometimes when Daniel passed it, he would stop and remember the day he saw Grace on that dusty road. The weight on her back, the children at her sides, the moment his whole world changed. He never forgot. He never let himself forget. Because forgetting would mean forgetting the lesson that had saved his life, that it is never too late to choose differently, that the past does not have to define the future, that love, real love, is not a feeling, but an action repeated every day in small ways until it becomes unbreakable. Daniel Mensah had once been a man who ran from responsibility. He became a man who ran toward it. He had once been a man who believed lies because they protected his pride. He became a man who chose truth, even when it cost him everything. He had once been a man who measured success in wealth and power. He became a man who measured success in presence, in consistency, in the quiet courage of showing up when it mattered. And in the end, that transformation was worth more than any empire he could have built. Because empires crumble. But family endures. Daniel Mensah learned this truth the hard way, through loss, through shame, through years of regret and the long, difficult work of redemption. But he learned it, and he lived it, and when his story was told, it was not told as the tale of a billionaire who came back to show off his success. It was told as the story of a father who found his way home.